Hello guys, welcome back a new reaction video. Today we will watch Wolfie with what's the best grass type Pokemon competitively. Like, subscribe to Wolfie. His team makes amazing content. Let's see if we can find it. Iconic lasts and white edit. Amazing. I know it's amazing video because it's Wolfie. He wants to upload only quality content, so check them out. They're amazing. And let's start with the video.
For some reason, it feels like people think that grass-type Pokemon aren't actually very good. On the one hand, I do kind of get it because grass-type Pokemon have a ton of weaknesses, and they also used to be a lot worse than they are now since they've gotten a lot of buffs over the years. But no matter the reason, I feel like people just really underestimate grass-type Pokemon and are always surprised to see them doing well. This is really funny to me as a competitive player because grass-type Pokemon are actually so good right now that almost every team that does well has at least one grass-type on it. I myself just won a tournament using 2 different grass-type Pokemon.
Pokemon
Anyway,
album.
There are actually a number of really good grass-type Pokemon, and today we're going to be talking about some of the best. Before we talk about the 3 best grass-type
Rillaboom,
Venusaur,
Venusaur,
best grass-type Pokemon that are
Ogerpon.
just short of the pinnacle. Starting with Venusaur. Okay, let's be honest. I mean, nobody clicked on this video and thought we weren't going to talk about Venusaur, right? Venusaur's been good pretty much since I started playing competitive Pokemon, which, let's be honest, this is a long time ago at this point, so it definitely deserves a spot on this list. Now,
that's so best.
3 different Venusaurs. There's Vanilla Venusaur, which we all know and love. There's Mega Venusaur, and then there is...
Mega Venusaur is actually pretty good, and Gigantamax Venusaur is just... It's like base Venusaur, but on cocaine.
Gigantamax Venusaur. Each of the different Venusaurs was good at different times, but I'm not going to talk about each one individually because that would be completely ridiculous. Let's talk about them all together. I think it actually makes sense to start with Mega Venusaur because that was the first time where Venusaur really entered competitive Pokemon as a main threat. To understand what makes Mega Venusaur so good, we should probably talk about some things that are going to be true for all of the grass types on our list. Most notably, the fact that they have a large number of weaknesses. Grass type Pokemon are weak to 5 different types, which is a lot, and I think it's part of the reason why people tend to think of grass type Pokemon as being really weak. That being said, they have a number of useful resistances, most notably to ground, water, and electric attacks, all of which are really hard to resist. A lot of the best grass type Pokemon have a way of mitigating the high number of weaknesses, whether with a secondary type, an ability, or something else. In Mega Venusaur's case, it's the ability. It gets the ability Thick Fat, which halves the power of fire and ice type attacks. Combining this ability with the secondary poison typing, and you'll find that Mega Venusaur actually only has 2 true weaknesses, to flying and psychic. Add on to this the fact that Mega Evolution gives you a ton of bonus stats, and in Mega Venusaur's case, that's mostly applied to its defenses and special attack stat, and you end up with a bulky grass type Pokemon that's really hard to remove while still being able to output respectable damage. When X and Y first released and Mega Evolution was added to the game, the first 2 years of those formats, 2014 and 2015, Mega Venusaur actually saw a fair bit of play. I myself used it to win a regional alongside Mega Banette, which, just to be clear, was not a good Pokemon by any means. I'm gonna say it wasn't even an okay Pokemon by any means. It was one of those things where after I won, people were like, huh? And then nobody ever looked at Mega Banette again, which was probably for the best and the correct decision. Anyway, Mega Venusaur was really good because it was able to function as this kind of like...
They kind of failed on that one.
Where if you got rid of the flying and the psychic types, you could sometimes just put it in a position where...
If you made Mega Banette faster and have it more attack, so it's a physical Gengar, I mean, then Banette would have been maybe actually good or something. Like, it's not a gold stuff video. We are just continue this video. But yeah,
being a grass type gives it access to a lot of really annoying attacks, and we'll touch on some of those more later. But here, what I'm talking about is moves like Synthesis, Giga Drain, which could help keep its health. Giga Drain, just make it impossible to get off the field. It also gives access to the move Sleep Powder, which is one of my personal least favorite
accuracy.
And we're gonna talk about Sleep Powder a little bit more later when we talk about regular Venusaur.
You have Spore on other grass types, like Among Us.
both the same Pokemon. Yeah, good one, Wolf. Yeah, wow. That's the analysis you came here for, right, folks? Yeah, let's go, Wolf. Great analysis. Anyway, Sleep Powder is normally used on fast and frail Pokemon to knock a threat out of commission before they can attack, and then trying to knock it out with, you know, double up from the partner later or something, or another powerful attack. But Mega Venusaur was able to use it in a different way because of its bulk. Normally with Sleep Powder, you kind of get one chance, and if you miss, you might have a bad time, but with Mega Venusaur, it was so tanky that you could afford to miss once, sometimes even twice, and hitting all your Sleep Powders could have a really big effect on the battle. Mega Venusaur won multiple regional championships and at least one national championship in the first 2 years of X and Y, and even though it didn't see a ton of play after 2015, let's just say the other Venusaur...
Wait. Okay, this team is actually pretty scary, since you have the opportunity to go for Mega Venusaur Y to get the sun up, for regular Venusaur to get chlorophyll up. And with chlorophyll, you have double speed and you can output such many damage that you wish to do. And it's actually really good to and if Charizard has a bad matchup, you can always just Mega Evolve Venusaur. So it's actually really good. It's actually a really good strategy between those two. It's a really good synergy.
And even though it didn't see a ton of play after 2015, let's just say the other Venusaur forms would help to pick up the slack. So let's talk about base Venusaur. Despite also being, well, Venusaur, base Venusaur actually plays extremely different than Mega Venusaur. While Mega Venusaur is super slow and tanky and tries to kind of put itself in a situation where it can't be gotten rid of, regular Venusaur is fast and frail and really annoying. Its main use has to do with its ability, Chlorophyll. This doubles its speed stat in the sun, which makes it a fast and frail Pokemon that is really disruptive, again with Sleep Powder, although this time with more of a focus on offense thanks to its good coverage moves like Earth Power and Weather Ball, on top of the grass moves like Leaf Storm or Frenzy Plant or Giga Drain and Sludge Bomb. It would almost always hold the Focus Sash when in its base form, which would give you some insurance in case Sleep Powder missed, though because it was so frail, this was always a risk as well. Venusaur also saw some play in the first couple years of X and Y because you could only Mega Evolve Pokemon on your team, and pairing Venusaur's Chlorophyll ability with
like I said,
Charizard Wise Drought ability was a really dangerous combination. Non-Mega Venusaur actually won Australian Nationals back in 2014. Of course, most Venusaur in those early years were Mega Venusaur because you could just bring Charizard and Venusaur together and Mega Evolve whichever one was better, or you just Mega Evolve Charizard and then give up on Venusaur's item. It wasn't that big of a deal. Venusaur really started seeing success during Sun and Moon, where it could be used alongside one of the strongest restricted Pokemon, Groudon. Certain formats allow for super powerful legendary Pokemon called restricted Pokemon, and you only get one or two of them on your team.
Is Groudon not really better right now?
With Groudon, obviously, to help set up the sun and double
since you have a physical and special combo.
Xerneas was the ultimate setup sweeper, and so being able to use Sleep Powder to knock your opponent's restricted Pokemon out of commission for a couple turns while you either hit them with Groudon or set up with Xerneas could be really threatening. Now, it did take these restricted Pokemon for regular Venusaur to feel worth using. It basically saw zero usage during 2018, which was the other year it would have been legal, but it had a lot of usage actually in 2019 with these powerful
I kind of want to use Venusaur.
Multiple events, actually some of them back to back to back, and it was just a dominant threat in the metagame that you had.
It's such a fun Pokemon to use.
Entire team falling asleep, and yet neither Mega Venusaur or Base Venusaur reached the heights that Gigantamax Venusaur hit. Gigantamax Venusaur is more similar to Base Venusaur than Mega Venusaur, in part because it's just like a big version of regular Venusaur, but there is something that is very, very different between the two. Gigantamax Venusaur gets access to a signature max move called G Max Fine Lash. This move was just completely nuts. Like, just to be honest, it was completely unbalanced. There were 4 max moves that had this effect. It was Colossal and then the 3 Kanto starters, and yeah, just like not balanced at all. I pretty much won the Players' Cup 2 just off the strength of Gigantamax Colossal, and Gigantamax Charizard and Gigantamax Venusaur were 2 other Pokemon that had the same effect that were just completely unbalanced. Like, I'll just be completely honest, they were just stupid. For anyone who doesn't know, number 1, you're very lucky. Number 2, here's what the effect did. If you hit a Pokemon even through Protect with
it was painful
or any other equivalent, your entire team would lose 1/6 of their health every turn for the next 4 turns. If you get the maximum value out of this, I think it comes out to like 1/3 of a team's total HP as a passive effect of landing a single move. Now remember, base Venusaur was already really good in the sun as just like a disruptive Pokemon that could sometimes do a lot of damage, but when you added on this capability, it became a complete menace. Thanks to Dynamax doubling its HP, you also weren't forced to run Focus Sash in the way that you were with base Venusaur, so you could do stuff like Life Orb to boost your damage or Weakness Policy, which could be very scary if you let it get set up because, yeah, I probably don't need to explain that to you. Now, events were canceled thanks to the pandemic during 2020 and 2021, so we didn't really get to see what Venusaur would have done if there had been like a ton of events.
That would have been a
Limited online
crime.
Events that we did have were, well, there was a lot of Venusaur, let's just say. There were 4 online events that served as kind of replacement to real life events during the pandemic called the Players Cup 1, 2, 3, and 4. And Venusaur wasn't legal for the first one, but in the other 3, it placed first, second, and I think 4th. So yeah, that should give you an idea of how strong it was.
It
Now,
was
for
so
all these tournaments,
broken.
There wasn't like Groudon or another, I don't know, very powerful Sunsetter, so it had to be used with
Torkoal,
who was just,
yeah.
let's just say that Torkoal is a bit weaker than Groudon. During 2022,
A little
during
bit.
the final year of Sword and Shield's life cycle, Groudon was added back in alongside the other restricted Pokemon as we played a restricted format for this final year. Gigantamax Venusaur was probably as expected, very, very good. It won multiple regional championships and one of the 3 internationals that took place. I've said a lot about Venusaur, so I'll try to wrap this up here, but yeah, basically the only reason that Venusaur isn't higher on our list is because it's inherently very inconsistent. A lot of the success of Venusaur revolves around Sleep Powder, which is only 75% accurate, and so while players have had success with it, it's really hard to kind of scrape that top level with Venusaur because it's just such an inherently risky move to use. That being said, it's still undoubtedly one of the best grass-type Pokemon of all time, so it definitely belongs on our list. Okay, next up is a Pokemon who's actually already been on the best water types of all time list, Ludicolo. I talked a fair bit about Ludicolo in the best water type Pokemon video, and so I don't really want to talk too much about it here just because, I mean, I've already been yapping quite a bit about Venusaur, so maybe we'll compensate by cutting Ludicolo a little short, but basically, it's a really good Pokemon. Its main niche is the fact that it's super good against rain teams, and I guess just weather teams in general, especially in a restricted format. By being both water and grass type, it's got a quadruple weakness to water moves, which is really, really valuable in a format with Kyogre, and it also resists grass as well without being weak to fire. Ludicolo has been used a lot over the years, both as a rain sweeper and as a counter to rain-based teams. Even in formats where there isn't Kyogre, it's still really good as a Pokemon that can abuse, you know, rain, and also as a Pokemon that you can slap on if your team has a weakness to rain because it's just so good against water type moves. It also has some utility because it's able to use Fake Out to disrupt opponents, and it used to have Scald. Rest in peace, Scald. You are very missed. I miss Scald a lot. I actually feel really bad for water types, but not you, Ogerpon. I don't feel bad for you. Anyway, it's a bulky Pokemon. It can support its team. It works as a sweeper. It works as a tank. It's just overall.
But it won't work that well for Ogerpon.
Stats are a little bit
Ogerpon is more physical.
Really over the course of history, and I think it's a really cool Pokemon, and I think it works really well as a grass type. So yeah, definitely deserves a spot in this list. Okay, new Pokemon time. Let's talk about Whimsicott. Whimsicott is similar to Ludicolo in that its stats are not very good, but it has other things that it can do, and I
support, Tailwind, Encore, all those moves.
As a Tailwind setter. It has the Prankster ability, which gives priority to all of its moves that don't do any damage, and Tailwind is one of the best supporting moves in the game, doubling its team's speed stat, and when you're able to use that with priority, it becomes very dangerous because you get the benefit right away. Prankster Tailwind is really valuable because changes to speed happen immediately, so being able to set Tailwind up before either your opponent's Pokemon attacks almost always is going to result in your partner Pokemon moving before either of their partner Pokemon, which can be really valuable, especially if you have some like middling speed powerful attacker against a faster and frailer Pokemon. Whimsicott is cool typing, being grass and fairy type as well, and that comes with a lot of benefits too. Moonblast is a really solid attack since it has a really high base power, and that helps compensate a little bit for when
Ja. Er zitten 2, maar die zijn niet leeg. Die moeten... Sorry? Oh ja, dan is er... Ja, ja, dat was het. Ja. Ja, dat was het.
Whimsicott's lack of offensive stat. I actually looked this up recently because I was like, yeah, what's Whimsicott's base special attack stat? It's like low, right? It's probably like 90. It's 77. Yeah, it's
77.
Really low. For reference, that's lower than Pokemon like Dolive and Quilava and Monferno, so that should tell you pretty much everything you need to know.
That's sad, but
great, but it does have a really high base speed stat, which is really useful on a Tailwind Pokemon. Most notably, it's faster than Pokemon like Thundurus and Tornadus, so it can use Tailwind before they can taunt it, which is a really big deal. Fake Tears can help to weaken the opponent and set up for a powerful double attack. Helping Hand can do something similar and is useful in both physical and special attacking partners. Charm can be used to actually really weaken a physical attacking opponent. Tickle does something similar, makes them a little bit less weak than Charm would, but also lowers their defense stat to kind of combo with a physical attacking partner. I've actually played against Worry Seed Whimsicott in a tournament where it used Worry Seed to override its own Regigigas' slow start, which was cool. And you can also use that to wake your partners up if they fall asleep against like Venusaur or other sleep related Pokemon. So it has a really deep supporting move pool as well. Whimsicott saw a fair bit of usage back in 2015 when it was paired with Mega Gengar. With Mega Gengar Shadow Tag trapping the opponents in, you could do something really mean and use Encore with Prankster Whimsicott to force the target to use the same move again, and then disable with Mega Gengar to prevent them from using that move that you just told them they had to use, and basically this forces the target to struggle. Whimsicott's Fake Tears also paired really well with Mega Gengar's high special attack and high speed stats, making it a really dangerous duo. Just like Venusaur and Ludicolo, Whimsicott is also good in restricted formats.
Scary.
Tailwind, but also thanks to its other supporting moves as well. Multiple Whimsicott top cut the World Championship back in 2016, and other Whimsicott won regionals in that format as well. The following year, Whimsicott actually won the World Championships using a really cool and creative Z
Normalium
set, which let it
C.
use both Z Electric and Z Fairy because it had both partner Tapus on the field, and the Z move would transform based on what the terrain was. Whimsicott did have a little bit of success for the rest of Sun and Moon, though it wasn't especially mainstream. But when Sword and Shield came around, it quickly became one of the best Pokemon in the game. Aaron Trailer used Whimsicott to win the first tournament of Sword and Shield, where it would also place 2nd, 3rd, and 5th. And it went on to dominate all of the tournaments up until the pandemic sent everybody home. In 2022, when tournaments returned, Whimsicott was once again a standout pick. Aaron Trailer, funnily enough, got 2nd at the first tournament following the pandemic, once again with Whimsicott, and he made a really cool play where he used Dynamax Whimsicott to prevent the opponent's Amoonguss from putting his team to sleep, which I just think is cool, so I wanted to mention. Unfortunately, Whimsicott really hasn't been used at all in Scarlet and Violet, mostly because it wasn't in the game until recently, but even now that it is in the game, nobody really wants to use Whimsicott because Tornadus is also a Prankster Tailwind setter, and they gave it Bleak Wind Storm, which is some stupid move that is just like incredibly powerful, and so it's really hard to justify using Whimsicott over Tornadus when they both have Prankster Tailwind, but Tornadus is just a lot more threatening, and Bleak Wind Storm is just a really broken move, although a really frustrating move as well. Anyway, I think it's clear that Whimsicott is still clearly one of the best grass type Pokemon of all time, and even though it's not very good right now, I think that that could absolutely change in the future, especially if Tornadus isn't around. Okay, our next Pokemon on the list actually is not in Scarlet and Violet, and I think out of everything we're going to talk about today, it's one of the very few Pokemon that didn't make it into the current games. It's a personal favorite Pokemon of mine, Ferrothorn. Ferrothorn is really cool because despite being a grass type and having a ton of weaknesses, as a steel secondary type, it's incredibly tanky. Ferrothorn plays most similarly to Mega Venusaur, serving as...
It's only you don't want to see a Tepic with Ember or Flamethrower. You will die. That's the only thing.
Really annoying tank that's difficult to take down since its steel secondary typing gives it a ton of resistances. It's primarily used as a leech seed Pokemon that you try to kind of...
It doesn't like a Tepic with Ember or Flamethrower or something.
As well. It's really slow, which actually combos quite nicely with its move Gyro Ball, which does more damage the faster the target is. This is really useful against fast fairy type Pokemon like Xerneas most notably, but it's also useful against faster and frail Pokemon in general like Tapu Koko and Mega Gengar. Ferrothorn's been good pretty much since it was introduced. I actually used it to get 2nd in a regional all the way back in 2012, which was a long time ago for anyone who can do math, but it feels like it's a Pokemon that's like never really been bad. It's not always like a top threat or anything, but it makes use of each generation's mechanics a little bit differently, and it always feels like a Pokemon that you have to respect or you risk losing to. Ferrothorn is also funny because it feels like it has similar usage in and out of restricted formats, but it plays very differently in a restricted format than in a regular format. In a non-restricted format, it's often there as like this kind of like super tank Pokemon that you want to bring to the end game once you've gotten rid of the fire and fighting type Pokemon.
Yeah.
I think there are its only 2 weaknesses actually, and if they don't have super effective moves, and if you set up Leech Seed properly and you have left
and Iron Barbs,
you just can't get rid of it and you win the war of attrition. In a restricted format, it actually makes use of its bulk as a switch-in partially, but also of its typing offensively, where
what's the rain? How did the Charizard not kill?
Kyogre and Xerneas are all weak to one of its stab moves, and Pokemon like Mega Rayquaza actually can take a fair bit from Gyro Ball, especially if they've dropped their defenses after a Dragon Assault. Dragon Ascent? What is that move called? I definitely use
Dragon Ascent.
Dragon Ascent? I'm locking in that as my final answer. I'm not gonna look it up. I don't know.
You're true.
Dragon Ascent? Anyway, Ferrothorn feels like a Pokemon where it's kind of like always good. It's super reliable, it's really tanky, it actually hits pretty hard. And in Sword and Shield, actually, during the online era, it actually saw a decent amount of play as an Assault Vest Pokemon, where it actually works really well as a Dynamax Pokemon. Max Steel Spike could be used to boost its defenses. Max Overgrowth kind of got around the low accuracy of Power Whip as a thing. And it can sometimes run even ground moves to raise its special defense as well. But after a couple Max Steel Spikes, it was basically impossible to remove with a physical attack unless it was maybe a fire type attack. And so lots of players use Ferrothorn both offensively and defensively by using the Assault Vest item. Anyway, Ferrothorn was never a Pokemon that was hitting like crazy high usage stats or something. Like it never had anything similar to Whimsicott or Venusaur or anything. But the thing is that it's always been a consistent pick. Like there's never really been a format where Ferrothorn is like, oh, Ferrothorn's super bad, like I can't use it at all here, unlike a lot of other Pokemon on this list. But even though it doesn't have like the most usage, it's always a Pokemon that seems to be whittling its way into the top of tournaments and winning tournaments a decent bit of the time. And so I feel like it's a Pokemon that like is kind of difficult to use, but when it's used well, it can have really high peaks. And I think it's absolutely one of the best grass type Pokemon of all time. Okay, the last one before we talk about the top 3 is a Pokemon.
Wolfie, isn't there a better way to green screen? I'm just looking, it's like pixely. Isn't there like something with G-Force or something? Like there's an AI green screener. I think I saw something like that, but I'm not sure. I don't know. Maybe it can be the lighting. I think that's one thing that's the quality of the video is just a little bit lower. I think if that's improved, like you will be like top notch in every single kind of content you upload. It's already good. The editing is great. It's the green screening. I don't know. For as an editor being, it's just scary. I don't like that, but I will shut up. It's not my video.
I was really kind of unsure where to put. It's the newest Pokemon.
Yeah, I don't know.
And it's the only Pokemon
I just shut up.
that has never played in a World Championship at the time that I'm making this video. It's Ogerpon, and I guess that means that it's technically 4 different Pokemon, but I'm going to treat them all as one, even though they play kind of differently because it's just the item that changes. And the whole thing is actually really confusing because like I wanted to put it in top 3, but then I was like, well, I can't really put it in the top 3 because like it hasn't even played in a Worlds yet, and we've really only had one format, kind of 2, but it's kind of one at the same time with it. So anyway, I really wasn't sure what to do with Ogerpon, so I'm putting it on the base list, and I didn't put it in the honorable mentions, even though I put Ogerpon Water in the honorable mentions in the water type video because, well, like for the same reason, but there's 4 more Ogerpons here. Anyway, let's just talk about Ogerpon because the whole thing's kind of a mess. Ogerpon is one Pokemon that's technically 4 Pokemon, depending on the type of mask that it wears, which changes.
Ogerpon is such insane.
We can talk about all 4 of them here. At the moment, it seems that the tier list is kind of water, then fire, then grass, then rock, but there's use for all of them, so it's not like I would say that any one of them.
It's kind of changed, I think, after this video. Fire, water, and then these 2 other. But yeah.
Even the rock one, which is the
I prefer personally more
Ogerpon is really
the fire
because the way that it functions changes like really entirely based on the mask. The base abilities change, the Terra ability raises a different stat depending on which mask it has on, and its signature move Ivy Cudgel changes type as well. At the moment, Ogerpon is incredibly strong. It's actually become the #1 most used Pokemon in certain tournaments on the second day of competition, reaching upwards of over 66%.
Level up completed.
Which is, well, really absurd because there are 4 different ones, so you figure that's even higher when you factor in all the Ogerpons. It's just a Pokemon that kind of has everything. It has really good stats. It's naturally like tanky enough, like it's not so frail, but it also is really fast and hits really hard. Its typings are really useful. Grass and fire is not unique anymore because they made Scovillain, but rare. Grass and water for a while was just Ludicolo, so that's also a pretty rare typing. Its signature move is completely ridiculous. It's a super strong move with no drawback.
Ivy Cudgel,
yeah, which is again absurd. If it's wearing one of the masks and not the teal mask, all of its moves just get a flat 20% damage increase, which, okay, like I guess that's all right. Yeah, sure, thanks, Game Freak. Also, its move pool is ridiculous. Not only does it get Spiky Shield, which is just an upgraded version of Protect, it also gets Follow Me, which is a move that they're typically very hesitant to give to any Pokemon that's even remotely good. For a while, Clefairy was the best Follow.
Okay, Wolfie, if you ever see this video, try please a substitute on Ogerpon. Just the pressure of the opponents to see those fucked up overpowered substitute move. People don't like that. It's like you have to decide if you want to hit Ogerpon just in case there's a substitute, and you have Horn Leech as option to heal, and it's such a good move. Like, try it out, Wolfie. Just practice a little bit around that. I swear, if there's a new regulations coming back or is back around this time being with Ogerpon being back, try it. I've tried it and I love it. It's so freaky broken.
Follow me user, or one of the best follow me users at least, which should tell you something about how good the normal follow me users are. And so the fact that we have a Pokemon that is this good just naturally and also has follow me, it's very, very, very messed up. Ogerpon doesn't normally run a lot of coverage moves, but it gets a fair few. The grass type one will occasionally run moves like Stomping Tantrum, Superpower, or Knockoff. The fire type one hits incredibly hard. The water type one is really tanky and is a great answer to Urshifu. But yeah, basically it's a really strong Pokemon, and the flexibility makes it just like really, really threatening, and it can kind of do it all, right? Like, Ogerpon Water is the main set right now, but I want a regional with Swords Dance Ogerpon Fire, even though Follow Me is the dominant set. It has a bunch of useful grass type moves. It has Wood Hammer, it has Horn Leech, it has Power Whip, which is in play. It has Grassy Glide, which I personally like if you pair it with Rillaboom. The only reason I haven't put it higher up on the list is because it just hasn't been around for long enough. And even though it is completely dominating play right now, and I do think that it has longevity, sometimes Pokemon, especially Pokemon that interact with a generation-specific like mechanic, or generational gimmick, I guess you could say, sometimes they'll just completely fall off in following years. And since a lot of Ogerpon's strength is the fact that it gets a different ability when it terras, and the fact that terrestrialization boosts its damage output and sometimes its defenses as well, depending, I just don't feel comfortable putting.
Can they make it like if you wear the mask, you will get the boost like the sword does from, and the shield from Zacian and Samazenta? Like, can't they do something like that? For in the next generations it will come out, since you otherwise put this Pokemon in such a rare spot, I guess.
Putting it in the top 3 because we just need to see more of it, like, before I can say that. But what I will say is that I wouldn't be surprised if after like a couple more years, especially if it continues being as good in the next Pokemon games, assuming it's even in those, I wouldn't be surprised at all to see this be one of the best grass type Pokemon of all time. Okay, before we jump into the best
potential is there.
Let's talk about some honorable mentions. Jumpluff. This is a Pokemon that is kind of similar to like Whimsicott mixed with
I hate it.
It doesn't have the strength ability, but it does have Chlorophyll, doubling its speed in the sun, and it's naturally very fast. And it has both Tailwind and Sleep Powder. This is a Pokemon that's also seen some play in restricted formats. It was paired with Groudon before. Helps it with the sun. Use Tailwind, use Sleep Powder to disrupt. It also gets Rage Powder, which neither Venusaur or Whimsicott get, which is the grass type redirecting move, which is really strong. I should say the grass type redirecting move, unless you're Ogerpon, in which case you get Follow Me, despite Rage Powder would have been totally fine there, in my opinion. Just from a balancing perspective, it would have been fine to give Ogerpon Rage Powder and not Follow Me, because other grass type Pokemon can ignore Rage Powder, but they can't ignore Follow Me. And so, yeah, there would have been some nice counterplay built in, but instead of one counterplay to Follow Me, you have to use, I guess, Arcaludon or Duraludon, and that's kind of your only option because it's the only tool you gave us, Game Freak. So thanks a bunch for that. Anyway, we're talking about Jumpluff here. Yeah, I don't really have that much to say about it. It was a Tailwind, it was a Sleep Powder, it was Rage Powder user, it was really used to support primarily Groudon. It could also be used with Torkoal in certain situations. It was a Pokemon that it definitely doesn't belong in our primary list or our top 3 list, but it is a Pokemon that saw a lot of success over the years and has been kind of a niche pick that has had some play and a decent bit of success, so I wanted to mention it. Gourgeist. Gourgeist actually is a Pokemon that has a decent amount of success. It got second at an international, it won at least one regional back in X and Y. This is kind of like your quintessential bulky ghost type Pokemon. It was often used with like Leech Seed and Will-O-Wisp to kind of, just be disruptive and kind of function as like I would say a worse version of Ferrothorn, where you're trying to get it to the end game and have it be in a position where the opponent just like can't hit it with anything, which is nice. It's a cool Pokemon. It's also just like Ogerpon. It technically is a Pokemon that has, I think it's 4 different forms, might even be 5 based on the size, and the stats change depending on the form, but that's not really relevant. I just think it's kind of funny. Abomasnow. Abomasnow is a Pokemon that like doesn't really feel like a grass type so much as a type, because it sets up with the hail, I guess now the snow, and it has seen enough usage over the years, and in specific formats it's actually been pretty decent. It's been a while since Abomasnow has felt good. I think back in 2010 it was actually really good. It looks like it won 3 different national championships based on my research, and then throughout Black and White as well. It was
that's insane though.
Pokemon, but since then it's definitely felt pretty niche. The thing is, with hail changing to snow, Abomasnow was actually pretty decent during a lot of the last year, or Scarlet and Violet's first competitive year. For most of it, Abomasnow was actually like a decently niche pick, and it didn't see a ton of success success, but it also wasn't like horrible by any means. So I think especially because it was so good back in 2010 during that rule set, and it was also okay during Black and White. It got second at Nationals in 2013. I wanted to include it here, but yeah, like I'm hopeful that the change from Hail to Snow will make it better. I think it definitely made it better. And hopefully in a future format where the power level is lower, it can actually see some decent play. Lilligant. Okay, I don't know what is up with
It's
grass types.
really
This is
interesting
also a Pokemon
though.
with two different forms, Hisui and Lilligant and regular Lilligant. This is
I love
Hisui
Hisui.
Sweeper, where it's a little bit less threatening than a Pokemon like Venusaur. And
I really love
What it
Hisui.
gains instead is the move After You, which is a very powerful attack, which lets the partner move immediately after the user. So by basically using the super fast chlorophyll Pokemon and pairing it with a Pokemon like Torkoal, you can use Eruption oftentimes before the opponent's able to attack, and that is very, very dangerous, as is Sleep Powder, as is the powerful grass or fighting type moves of its Hisuian form. Like, it's a couple other interesting moves as well, and it actually is a really good user of Terrestrialization, because with Terra Ghost you can become immune to Fake Out, which is really, really valuable and very threatening for opponents. So it's definitely not a Pokemon that's like, you know, super, super broken or anything, but it has a niche, and it's had a lot of success over the years, mostly paired with Torkoal actually, especially in formats where the power level is lower. Okay, our last honorable mention is a Pokemon that was a favorite of mine for a while, but I don't really like it anymore. But I'm putting it on the list anyway because I am hashtag unbiased. It's Tapu Bulu. Tapu Bulu is one of the most forgotten and saddest Pokemon of all time.
I love Bulu. I love this guy.
And initially I didn't even have it on this list, but my friends convinced me that it probably belonged here because during Sun and Moon's era, it was actually pretty
Wood Hammer.
I wouldn't say it was good, okay? I used it a lot, and it didn't feel very good a lot of the time. It almost never felt good. Oh yeah, I did win a regional with it, I guess, but I wouldn't read too much into that. Anyway, it was kind of useful because it was this anti-Tapu Pokemon, where the other Tapu were more popular, so by using Tapu Bulu, you could overwrite their terrain, and you were often the one who like could get the terrain. It was also like a decent defensive tool against them, and you know, Horn Leech was actually really good against a bunch of them, or Woodhammer could KO the frailer ones. It's an interesting Pokemon for sure. Grass and Fairy is like interesting typing, but it never really got to make use of it because it doesn't get any fairy moves like at all. I think it gets like Dazzling Gleam and is a physical attacker. But yeah, Tapu Bulu basically it's play rough. We'll almost never see play again because it's been completely outclassed by Rillaboom. Rillaboom also sits with grassy terrain with the same ability, but it gets moves like Fake Out and Grassy Glide, which for whatever reason Tapu Bulu doesn't get. So Tapu Bulu, it had a fair bit of play during the Sun and Moon era, but now that Rillaboom's around, there's basically no
If they gonna bring back Tapu, Lele, Fini, Coco, and Bulu, give this guy a better moveset, please. Make Tapu Bulu good. Make him good again.
reason to ever use it, in my opinion. So sorry, Tapu Bulu. See you never. Bye-bye. Oh, also, it's not one of the best grass-type Pokemon of all time, and it definitely doesn't deserve to be even on the honorable mentions list.
Among
It's
Us?
my favorite Pokemon, so I'm going to mention it here. Executor. I used it to get second place to the World Championship in 2012, and other than that, it really hasn't seen very much success, though it does pop up occasionally. Okay, now it's time for our top 3 best grass-type Pokemon of all time, and in my opinion, these 3 stand clearly above the rest, both in their history and their strength, and in the fact that they've really never been bad. These Pokemon have always been good, always been a menace, and have often been Pokemon that were dominating not just, you know, the grass types of the format, but the entire format themselves. Let's start with number 3, Kartana. Ever since Kartana was introduced, it has been...
I don't really like Kartana.
What you have to know about Kartana is that it's fast, it's very hard, and it has a very...
It's fast, it hits hard, but the moves, the base power is so low.
Dare I say, paper thin special defense stat. This is an original joke. Haha, I'm so funny and creative. Anyway, Kartana is a grass and steel type just like Ferrothorn, but whereas Ferrothorn is a slow and tanky Pokemon that aims to use the type defensively, Kartana aims to use it offensively. It was a great user of Z moves because it's so fast and so...
It's the only steel type move he learns is like 65, 75 power.
Giving it an attack boost, making it even stronger. Kartana also gets some interesting moves that are not grass or steel type moves. Most notably is Sacred Sword, which is a really
That's a
nice
good move.
Can't touch other steel type Pokemon with its stab attacks. It also gets Tailwind, and some players use like Focus Energy and some other sets as well. Substitute was actually used a fair bit on Kartana because it's so fast and frail that you really want to protect in front of it because otherwise it'll just knock you out. And if you do that and it gets a substitute up, it can be very dangerous. Despite being so frail, Kartana actually has seen a lot of play as a tanky Pokemon, either with the Assault Vest item, which buffs its special defense a ton, and if you invest your points wisely, you can survive some really...
That's actually interesting.
Actually, similarly to Ferrothorn, making
I
use of the
loved
type's defensive
the
benefits in addition to its offensive benefits.
Ganadel and Poipole.
And also as a Dynamax Pokemon, doubling the HP pool allowed Kartana to actually be really, really tanky, and especially with Dynamax, Kartana would often run Aerial Ace for max Airstream to boost its team's speed stats. Kartana's only been around since Sun and Moon, but since then it has won so many events, including the World Championships back in 2018. Kartana is actually similar to Ferrothorn in not just the typing, but also the fact that it works both in and out of restricted formats because of its grass typing, again, matching up really well into Groudon and Kyogre. That ends up being a really big deal with grass types, as it turns out. I noticed that, going into this video, I don't think I quite realized how good grass types are in restricted formats, but yeah, it's definitely something that I've noticed. But yeah, Kartana's really good against a lot of the restricted Pokemon, like, again,
Yeah.
Kyogre, and so it's seen a lot of play in restricted formats, but it also has such good stats that it works.
It's actually really good.
As well, so it's just a really consistent
But
Pokemon. It's won so many
not my
World
favorite.
championships. It's gotten close to winning the World Championships, even in times where
Not my
It's
favorite.
an incredible Pokemon. And it's a Pokemon that made really good use of both Z moves and Dynamax, which were the two main mechanics in the games that it was in. It's not currently in Scarlet and Violet, and personally I'm okay with that. Kartana does have a number of weaknesses. I mean, most notably and most obviously the fire type. Being quadruple weak to fire is very, very bad and has helped to kind of keep it in check for a while. It also is another reason why it pairs super well with Kyogre, helping to dampen that fire weakness a little bit. But also it's so frail on the special side, and though you can get around that with items like Focus Sash or Assault Vest, it's still something to be aware of, and it is always going to be a weakness because no matter how much you buff it up, you can only change that starting stat value so much. That being said, Kartana is still absolutely one of the best grass type Pokemon of all time, but that obvious weakness, I would say, is not super present in our number 2 slot.
Rillaboom.
Now, Rillaboom has been around for less time
And
than
Among
Kartana.
Us
In
is
fact, it
first.
has only been legal for 2 World Championships compared to Kartana's, I don't actually know, 17, 18, 19, 22, 4 World Championships? I don't know. And on top of that, Rillaboom took a little bit to get going. When it was first released, it didn't have access to its hidden ability, Grassy Surge, which is definitely essential in making it a viable Pokemon. So what makes Rillaboom so good? Number one, it has really good stats. It's very tanky, especially if you give it an Assault Vest, but it also hits really, really hard. On top of that, it's got kind of a nice speed stat for one of its moves, which we'll talk about a little bit later, where it's like not very fast, but it's
Fake out.
so slow. It's
Yeah,
like
fake
slower
out.
end of middle, which actually ends up being really
Fake out,
useful. Another thing we
U-turn,
should talk
Grassy
about are
Glide,
moves. Number one, it gets
Wood
Fake Out, which is
Hammer.
a super valuable priority move that is used to stop opponents from attacking for a single turn, and is really great just as a supporting move to
Brain
help your team
Punch.
kind of reposition and stay alive. Fake Out's not the only thing it can do though. It has Wood Hammer, which with Grassy Surge and Grassy Terrain boosting its damage output hits ridiculously hard. People have run Miracle Seed on this thing to do even more damage, and if you don't resist Wood Hammer, even if it doesn't have a boosting item, you're going to take a ton of damage. Gigantic Rillaboom was also an option that you could use to hit even harder because it had a special max move that did even more damage, but most of the time Rillaboom was just strong enough in its base form. On top of that, Rillaboom was eventually given Grassy Glide, which is a priority move that only has priority in grassy terrain.
Yeah.
How strong Rillaboom already is, this move is very dangerous because priority moves aren't really meant to be doing a ton of damage, but on Rillaboom, they certainly can hit pretty hard. Grass moves and supporting moves aren't the only things that it has, though. It also has knockoff to remove items, which is really, really useful.
Oh
It
yeah,
has
true.
horsepower,
High
it has
horsepower.
steel and fire and poison
But
Pokemon who resist.
high horsepower is, I think, lowered in stats or the damage output in grassy terrain. Or it is Earthquake, but I think high horsepower is also the same situation. Not sure, but I guess.
Grass type attacks, and it also has U-turn, which is very, very valuable, which allows it to tank a hit and then switch out, bringing in another Pokemon in safely without taking a ton of damage.
Yeah.
With its great move pool, great stats, and really valuable ability, it's kind of hard for Rillaboom to not feel like super useful on a team. You can use the terrain to heal your team up and cut Earthquake's power in half. Fake Out is always
Earthquake
useful
on
in every
half,
matchup,
okay.
and it hits so hard that unless
So not high
Rillaboom has,
horsepower,
like, a full
okay.
team of resists, and even then, it's just going to be doing
It's
so
it's
much
an
damage. When Rillaboom was
annoying
first given Grassy
thing.
Terrain, it was right before the first Players Cup, and it won the first Players Cup, and then I won the second Players Cup with it as well. In 2022, when events returned, it won multiple regional championships, and then went on to win the World Championships as well. Rillaboom also almost won the following year's World Championships in 2023, placing second, despite not
That's
being legal
insane.
for the entire year, except for the Worlds itself, so players didn't have time to like optimize or practice with it or anything in that format. This year, Rillaboom continues to prove that it's one of the best Pokemon in the format. I myself recently won a regional with it in Charlotte, which is the biggest official Pokemon tournament of all time. Video incoming. Actually, at this point, the video is probably already out. Watch that video. But yeah, Rillaboom is really, really strong. Pokemon. It has a ton it can do. It's always useful. It's super tanky. It hits really hard.
Nah,
It's a priority
it's
attack. It has a ton of
it's
utility.
insane.
It has a great ability. There's so much going for it. But not as much as the #1 Pokemon.
Among Us.
There's been a Pokemon
Among
that's
Us.
conspicuously absent from our
It's
list.
really
If you made it this
sus.
far, you can probably guess what it is. It's one of the most iconic and prolific grass-type Pokemon of all time. It's
Among Us.
always useful.
Among
It's
Us.
always a huge
Among
game to
Us.
play against.
Among
It's
Us.
I think Among Us is one of the most memorable grass-type Pokemon of all time, in part because it is so annoying to lose to. Among Us is by far the best Spore user in the game, with Spore being the only 100% accurate move that puts a Pokemon to sleep, and sleep being one of the most debilitating status conditions in the entire game. As if that weren't bad enough, Among Us's regenerator ability allows it to heal health every time it's switched out, and given that it's already naturally so tanky, this is just even more annoying and makes it so hard to get off the field. It can also support its team with Rage Powder to keep attacks away from more valuable offensive Pokemon, and it can even heal its partners with Pollen Puff, a move that not only heals 50% to a partner if you hit it, but also does damage to an enemy if you hit it with that instead. Among Us has literally been good since I started playing competitive Pokemon in 2011. In fact, it was one of the key Pokemon that my team lost to way back in my first year in 2011, and eventually led to me using Pokemon like Emboar to try and get a leg up on it. There has never been a Pokemon that has won the World Championships more than Among Us. It's tied with 3 wins with some of the other all-time greats. Most recently, it was actually the grass type that beat Rillaboom in the finals of the 2023 World Championships. I gotta say, there are very few Pokemon that were good in 2011 in my first season that are still good today, and the fact that Among Us has managed to keep up for this
Gotitel is still
not that many major
hard
buffs,
to
just
use.
Pollen Puff, everything else that's kind of had the whole time,
I'm
is
gonna
really,
lie.
really impressive. Among Us is a
If you know
Pokemon
how
that
to
when
play
it's in
him,
the format, you have to
it's
give it
good.
so much
Otherwise,
respect, or else you risk having your
it's
entire
hard.
team being put to sleep and just taken out of commission. On my Charlotte team, I actually had 3 Pokemon naturally immune to Among Us, with a 4th that could tear it to grass, just because I wanted to respect the mushroom as much as possible. What's funny about Among Us is that despite there being a couple like kind of clear counters, like safety goggles or grass type Pokemon or taunt, it just always feels like it's contributing to battles, even when opponents are specifically preparing for it. It's also cool because it has a bunch of different items it can use. I won a regional last year with Mental Herb Among Us, but Citrus Berry has been more popular. Rocky Helmet's great in formats with like Mega Kangaskhan or Urshifu or other powerful multi-hitting attacks, and that's not even mentioning items like Okaberry or Kovaberry, which have seen some use over time. Funnily enough, Among Us is actually one of the main reasons, actually probably the main reason, that grass-type Pokemon received a major buff going into X and Y, where they became immune to powder moves, because with Among Us's introduction the generation prior, Among Us is just putting other Among Us to sleep, and it was so difficult to stop. It's actually one of the only examples
that's kind of yikes though.
Below level 50, where people would run level 49 Among Us, specifically so that in Trick Room they would be slower than other Among Us, I guess faster than other Among Us, so that they could use Spore first. It was this really, really crazy strategy. That year people were running like Lumberry Among Us, they were running Chestoberry Among Us. Anyway, despite Among Us being really annoying to play against, it's probably one of the reasons
that's kind of weird
so good right now,
to play like that.
Basically forced the game to change just to compensate for it, and even that major change, even the addition of safety goggles, grass types being immune to Spore, Terra Grass nowadays, the ability Overcoat being introduced, none of these were enough to stop Among Us. It's still one of the best Pokemon, and I think it will probably be one of the best Pokemon until they make like Mega Among Us. Oh, I guess they made Brute Bonnet. Yeah, that didn't even stop it. While there are a lot of great grass type Pokemon, in my opinion, it's Among Us that's the best. Anyway, I've now talked about the best fire types and the best water types, and now the best grass types. So the next type that I talk about is up in the air. Let me know what you thought about this video, by the way. I tried to be a bit more of my old style, a little bit more informal, a little bit more conversational.
I like it.
Or if you didn't like it, I'd love to hear the feedback.
I didn't set a lot of, and
yeah, let me know what
I didn't set a lot in this video.
type you want me to talk about next. Let me know what you thought about this video.
I don't have much to say. I've watched I think the normal and the electric, and now the grass, I think. But guys, check out Wolfie. He makes amazing content. His team is crazy. Their editing and the quality is incredible. And I have nothing else to say. Wolfie is incredible. And it's a good way to learn more about the game. Guys, thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, and yeah, see you guys in the next video. Bye bye.